In your research, what has been the most interesting takeaway from your interviews with dozens of NSC staff?
The most interesting takeaway I have found is that the NSC staff is really a composite of public servants and government servants, government workers and government military officers, diplomats, spies, Treasury Department officials. And basically, they're all assigned to the NSC staff, even though for a year or two during sort of their careers at their departments. So you could sort of be an up-and-comer, 28, 29-year-old who has a bright future at the Defense Department or at the State Department, and be assigned over to the staff for a year or two to work on a president, whether you voted for that president or not. And what I find most interesting is how many, even though they are assigned from big bureaucratic engines that still pay their paychecks, right? The money still comes from the State Department if you're a Foreign Service officer, it comes from the Defense Department if you're a military officer, how much they still fight for a president. And the reasons for that are a lot, whether it is that they just like the president or come to like him or her, hopefully in the future. Some is that they view the president as sort of embodying the country they serve. So they want, when the president has a bad day, the country has a bad day. And some of it is just that that's how they sort of see it as their sort of becomes their priority, because serving and doing well by the president means good things for their career. So it's a very weird, most interesting thing. What you find is that the people who question the NSC when they were at their agency, maybe didn't vote for a president or didn't even like the president, still end up fighting for the president. And that's a very unique thing and something that would probably surprise people at a time where a president is maybe unpopular in the country, still has friends and fans on the NSC staff. So that's the most interesting thing I've learned.
How did your time as a speechwriter inform your approach to analyzing and communicating foreign policy?
That's a great question. So the first thing I always like to say, and I say this in the book, is that writing about the NSC staff is easier when you've either been saved or scolded by the NSC staff. And as a speechwriter for a cabinet official in the Obama administration, that meant that I had to deal with the NSC staff, who occasionally reviewed speeches or testimonies that I had written. And so sometimes they would save me, right? The NSC staff has one virtue, which is they generally know what government is doing in all parts of government, whereas the Defense Department typically keeps to itself and talks to itself. It doesn't talk to its State Department colleagues or Treasury Department colleagues, or maybe if they do, they don't know everything the Treasury Department's up to on Iran or North Korea or Russia. The NSC staff does. So when you write something, it might be wrong based on some new piece of information that you don't even know. So the NSC staff has saved plenty of my speech drafts or saved plenty of my speech drafts. The second thing is they scolded occasionally. They would sort of call and say, hey, you can't say that, or hey, that's wrong, or hey, what are you, crazy? I had a former SICE colleague call me and say to me, after reading one draft of my speech, the John Gans I took strategy and policy with so-and-so years ago would never have written this. This can't be John Gans that I knew. And so it sort of is a good reminder they save and call it. The other thing I'd say is that you can't really appreciate the stakes of government, the stakes of national security, just reading about it. And so one of the benefits of working at the Defense Department, working at the Secretary of Defense, is you really do get an appreciation for how dangerous and how serious our security interests and business is. And so that helps you appreciate and sort of add a degree of understanding to your reading of history and your attempts to write it.
And do you think the outsized role of the NSC can be best corralled by congressional action or a reorganization by the executive branch?
That's a great question. My hunch is that the only way you could reorganize the executive branch is probably with a congressional action. And so my argument would be you got to start with Congress first, because at the end of the day, Congress has probably abdicated its authority on foreign policy for a very long time. And that probably is one reason why the NSC staff has grown so large. And so I make the argument in the book, and make the argument in the Atlantic and other places, saying that basically at the end of the day, Congress needs to take a bigger role in finding out who's on the NSC staff, what they're doing, and what they believe in, because they're not just the White House's warriors, they're Congress's, and they're all of yours.